for me, what I get from your takeaway is a far more effective way of operating rather than trying to solve for everything on my own and trying to be a master of everything, which actually at times just gets exhausting.
Yeah, when you were speaking, you're just now, what I was reminded of is that I feel like society really pushes us into this idea of being the jack of all trades. But this ancient wisdom, it really gets us, I think one of the hard parts of accepting that people have different strengths and should really focus on that is this idea of acceptance. Acceptance for me has been a very difficult, or it can be a challenging part in my journey because we want to try to be the best at everything, but as soon as we can step back and accept who it all has to, I think what you were also speaking to was just this idea of authenticity, and the Bhagavad Gita really pushes us in this idea, because only 2 times in the Bhagavad Gita does Krishna mention, he repeats an instruction, and one of those times was referring to doing our duty rather than someone else's, carrying out someone else's task or job better, right? And that self-acceptance and sticking to, what we can do or being authentic to ourselves, I think is a real big part of the journey that I have found to be quite difficult. And when I peel even through that on why this acceptance is difficult, is that I think at the root of it, sometimes there's a lack of trust in the, the path that's being blazed for us, but oftentimes it takes the patience to see it through. So I just wanted to really appreciate that comment, because it's for me, it's bringing that point out on really just trying to, deeply accept, and not just at a superficial level of, I'm open to what's coming to me.
Can I just add, Rikin, that when you say acceptance, I've never ever thought of applying acceptance in this context. It's always in the context of like a hurdle, a very like tangible momentary hurdle, and then like, okay, it is what it is, and then like shift from there versus like something that's actually a bigger everyday existence, kind of like the paint on the wall type of scenario, which is like, I'm good at this, and this is a muscle I don't have. But the acceptance of self, I don't know. Well, I do know. I've never brought that level of compassion or even awareness. Maybe it's a mix of both, which is just to be able to pause and pivot by applying acceptance, which is kind of more liberating than trying to read every goddamn book on the planet and figure out business mastery, because that's the only route we know, which is educate yourself and then like make it happen.
Yeah, and I've just connected this idea of deep self-acceptance to self-compassion as well, and that leading to a more genuine self-compassion. Yeah. Stacy?
Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. This is a lesson that I've been learning through writing of my memoir. So y'all will be reading it in a few months. But yeah, I mean, it's about letting go what doesn't serve you. I think that's what is acceptance. And also, in order to do that, you have to have self-love, and you have to believe that what you're good at is worthy. And that's something that, I know that I have struggled with and discounted the things that I was good at, because I thought, well, they come easily, so they must be, easy, and everyone must, everyone must be able to do them. But that was a fallacy, right? Those are like, the superpowers, right? Those are the things that you're really good at. And so it's about, like you said, multiple things, about self-love of those, and faith to that you're on the journey and the right path, and belief in that. And it's about letting go what is not for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you remember the talk that Steve Jobs did at Stanford, he starts it by saying that you can never connect the dots looking, forward. You can only do it looking back. And then he builds on that. And he says, and that's why you have to have the faith in something that is going to pan out, right? Whether he's like God, divine, spirit, nature, something. But he says that is what's going to, carry you through the challenges. And I just, I've been listening. I've been just kind of reminding myself of that recently, which speaks to what you were just sharing. Alicia, Tiffany, Rasa, hey, Ronnie, how you doing? Anything else to add or share?
I'm going to add to the discussion because, it's such an important part, this part about authenticity and, self-love and acceptance. You probably know this, Rickon, but I have always been somebody who has been a fighter my entire life and, pushed myself to my limits and, in business, in every other way, I've always, stretched myself and never accepted status quo for myself. Probably been too hard on myself in many ways. And it's interesting because, you come to a point in your life where you have like a midlife crisis almost, where it's like, your body starts like responding and saying, wait, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. What are you doing to me? And, in my case, I got, very, very sick, and I had to accept the fact that there was nothing I could do about it, and that I had to finally stop and just listen to my body and be real with the fact that I'm this limited person that can only do so much. That has to be true to my nature. And, all of this, conversation that we've been having is, so deep in the sense that, you don't really realize how important this is until, it's probably too late, until something happens that forces you to step back and accept and accept in a huge way. It's like, accept that you're fallible, accept that you're going to die one day, accept that you're going to get sick, you're going to get old. You're not going to be able to do, all these things that you take for granted. And, this is going to happen. And what are you going, to Ed's point last week, consider you're living on borrowed time, and, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to prepare? How are you going to put yourself in a state of mind where you can accept, and not only accept, but be grateful for all these, events in life that are supposed to teach us something. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we all have a specific context, but just from our conversations, Russ, I really appreciate that point, because I think many of us have gone through this situation where, we only get, maybe you've heard this, a friend of mine shared this in a class, but usually we get, we get humbled, but usually we get humiliated first, and they all come from the same word. And usually it comes in reference to our own health, our capacity, something that we're trying to kind of, do, but then we get stopped in our tracks. So thank you.
Hello.
Hey, Enver, how are you? It's good to see you.
Fine. Thank you.
So I was hoping we could take a little bit of a read. I feel like this section is very much connected to last week, this qualities of the monarch, because we're going to talk about we're going to read about some amazing qualities that hopefully we want to imbibe as a way to move forward. So we're on page 123.
What's the name of this section, Rickon? Because they're all different pages in different books.
Qualities of divine monarchs. Someone wants to go ahead and read it, it'd be great.
I can go.
Please.
The fourth canto of the Srimad, Qualities of Divine Monarchs. The fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam explains that a king would sacrifice his personal convenience to serve his citizens. He had a deep love for his people and was as affectionate as a father. He also knew his subjects as a mother would know her children and would care for them with that same kind of intense affection. The fourth canto also discusses how a king would perform welfare activities as if they were his personal necessities. In his commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam 574 AC, Bhaktivedanta Swami states, although formally the government was a monarchy, all of the kings were very affectionate toward their citizens, and they strictly kept them engaged in their respective duties. Therefore, society was very smoothly conducted. The key concepts here are that kings were affectionate and that they engaged people in their respective duties. That is, a divine monarch was not a tyrant, but the greatest example of a servant leader. In the wonderful epic Ramayana, Ram instructs his brother Bharat, it comes to you as your natural duty to secure peace and happiness for the inhabitants of your kingdom. A load rests on his shoulders who takes from his subjects 1/6 of their belongings, but protects them not as the very children of his loins. Boundless fame to the end of time, crown him who seeks the welfare of his people with unflagging care and zeal, as he would his life and that of his children dearer to him than life. The Bhagavatam tells us that the king could collect taxes. However, the taxes were not meant only to line his own coffers. He was meant to spend the taxes on the citizens in ways that would benefit them. And he was personally responsible to oversee their protection if an emergency arose. From A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami's purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 3.6.10, those who are helpless must be taken care of by their respective guardians. Otherwise, the guardian will be subjected to the punishment of Yamraj, who is appointed by the Lord to supervise the activities of the sinful living creatures. The assistants or messengers of Yamraj are likened here to vultures, and those who do not execute their respective duties in protecting their wards are compared to serpents. Vultures deal very seriously with serpents, and similarly, the messengers will deal very seriously with neglectful guardians. From the purport to Srimad Bhagavatam, although it is misconceived that formerly a monarchical government was autocratic, from the description of this verse, it appears that not only was King Uttanapada Rajarsi, but before installing his beloved son Dhruv on the throne, he consulted his officers, considered the opinion of the public, and also personally examined Dhruv's character. Also, formerly this earth was ruled by only one saintly king. Kings were trained to become saintly. Therefore, they would know the concerns and the welfare of the citizens. Do I continue?
Please go ahead.
These points are all significant. Uttanapada, the father of Dhruv, was a powerful king, but when he wanted to enthrone his son Dhruv, he did not make the decision autocratically. First, he sought the approval of his ministers, then the people, and only then did he personally examine his son's character to see if his son was actually fit to rule. The order of these steps is also important. A king's ministers are supposed to know both what the people need and what is needed for the smooth management of the empire. The people should also be petitioned. How do they see his son? Accepting their recommendations, the king is then free to apply his own criteria to his son's character and to test his strength, courage, wisdom, and generosity. Only after all three of these stages were completed did he consider placing his son on the throne. Kings were particularly trained to become saintly and to have no concern beyond the welfare of their citizens. This mentality is the qualification of a divine monarch. The monarch was trained systematically to care for his citizens' needs. This was his raison d'etre. In fact, the essence of a divine monarch was his position as the topmost servant leader, one who had no concern other than to facilitate, protect, and guide his citizens. Those who served under such a monarch were extremely blessed. Here are some of the duties of a divine monarch. Dosana, to see that there is sufficient food to feed all of the citizens. Pranama, distributing gifts to satisfy them. Upalalana, calling meetings and speaking sweet, thoughtful words in order to satisfy the people. Anusasana, giving instructions on how to become good citizens. Another example of a divine monarch's nature is found in the Bhagavatam's 4th canto. Here we see that Dhruv left his kingdom to his younger son. Normally, the oldest boy would inherit the throne, but in Dhruv's case, his eldest son, Utakla, was a highly evolved being, free from both material designations and the desire for power. Therefore, he practiced Jada Yoga, acting as if he were deaf, dumb, and imbecilic, so that he would not be given the responsibility of the throne. In this way, he avoided being disturbed by those wishing to sway him from the spiritual path. It is explained in the commentary on this section that the elderly family members and ministers thus assessed Dhruv's two sons and decided that the younger son, Vatsala, should succeed his father. We know from ancient scriptures that a divine king always consulted the sages and his ministers. The sages or brahmanas were responsible for offering unbiased, non-partisan advice. Divine monarchs were duty-bound to follow such advice because ultimately divine monarchy was meant to be a sacred rule. The Brahmins, who spent their time in spiritual contemplation, would often see beyond the swirling waters of politics to more essential principles that go beyond material conceptions. They were the carriers of spiritual tradition and were prominent in a time when those who were most enlightened were actually the people responsible for the needs of the entire society. Today, we see quite a different model. Humanity has changed the system so that the masters of coercion and manipulation become leaders. People today are more prone to use the power of personality than the power of soul infusion.
Great, thank you. Any particular qualities that stood out in this section? They were mainly listed in the first half of this section, but anything that particularly jumped out?
I'll just share one thing around some of the duties of a divine monarch. We're back here in Kitwe, in this town in Zambia, after like 15 years away, and it's now been about 2 years that we've been here, and we have a lot of stuff is coming up to earth around various society committees and boards and a social club amongst our community, where there's a lot of breakdown, including the existing committees, the chairman, the other committee members in 2 different bodies. Their term is meant to be either 2 years or 5 years. I'm not sure the exact term, but they've been there for now about 15, 16, 17 years. And one of the main reasons they say is that there's none of the youth are stepping up to take over the role, is primarily what they say. And so something I got from last week's reading and something we have as one of our values is leaders create leaders, about being able to replace yourself. And as we've recently, they've had AGMs for some of these committees, we're inviting other people, we're supporting. I'm not personally standing for a role of one of these social clubs, but I am encouraging others to take over and the person that's there to hand over. And I look at, in our society, as we're trying to organize a few things, there are people in our friend circle, in our community, who are dealing with the breakdown. So as we're looking at leading the society, what comes to mind reading this one is, as a leader of this society or this club or the cultural community, are we, if I were to step up, if we were to step up, what this reading is offering me is some insight, some guidance into where, in what events, what activities would I fulfill on these duties, So one is in the case of food, that they're taken care of in terms of whatever their needs are for that committee or group or society. Are they rewarded in terms of distributing gifts? Do we regularly call meetings where we are really empowering them, creating context and so on? And are we guiding people to be good members of the community, of the society, and to step up to leadership? So, which is some form of leadership training. And I can see what's missing, and I can also see if any of us were to step into it, these are certain practices to embody.
Hmm. I appreciate the point you were bringing up about just, I think there's a general sense in many areas of life where the generation above us feel like the younger generation aren't stepping up, and there's a sense that they have to, keep things going because no one else is around or people aren't qualified enough. So, but I also think that there's also a breakdown in letting the younger generation make the mistakes they need to be able to take on the positions they need to take on with regard, which, in a variety of areas. But it's just a general observation that I've seen that I think the older generation a little bit attached to the position, and then they frame it in a way that the younger generation maybe aren't ready. But then we're not also potentially also given the opportunity. I just wanted to share these 3 things that jumped out in that second paragraph, these key concepts that kings are affectionate, being, they're good at delegation, and there's a sense of accountability. I was thinking to myself, just in general with just leadership in general, that for me, it's easy to delegate and I can hold people accountable, but it's not always easy to be affectionate. Affectionate in a way that, to always be encouraging, to always be loving, to always be supportive. I find that quality of affection. And if you could see here, the duties of the divine monarch, they list out the 4 things. This calling meetings and speaking thoughtful words in order to satisfy the people. We definitely call meetings, but I don't always think that, uplifting, supporting, encouraging may always be the focus of those meetings. So I was just personally taking this quality of affectionate to heart in this section. Paul?
Oh, thanks, Rick. And no, so I'm looking at leadership sort of in the context of my own reality as an entrepreneur, and I do like the parental angle of it and
Mhm.
engaging the people in your inner circle for opinions before getting there. What I actually also liked was the whole concept of collecting taxes, and taxes really in an entrepreneurial sense is really the profitability. And I think reinvesting in people and making sure that as an entrepreneur, there's enough in the coffers to be able to carry them through good and bad times was also quite good. But there was a lot of really resonating things in terms of the way I try to lead things, and a big gap in terms of where to go. So I did like the approval of ministers, then the people, and only then personally examining his son's character. So basically relying on your circle of influence to help make decisions before just ruling it on your own. And I think Ambika said it earlier, every achievement in our life is a result of of effective collaboration. And without that, you can't really do that unless you care for your people and the people you work with. So that was really quite good.
Yeah. I'm really appreciating your analogy of the monarchs taxing versus and then the entrepreneur leading their company and using profit to invest back into the people. That's a really powerful point that I think I don't think it's so obvious when we look at the lives of monarchs, but it really applies really well to all of us in our specific context of and it requires a certain sense, and that's why the kind of the development of our spiritual self is so important, because detachment from the profits is not an easy thing, right? To keep it for ourselves, to use it for some personal endeavor, to hold on to it is not an easy thing. So that selflessness to be able to invest back into the people, and knowing that it will bring further not only just profit but prosperity to everybody involved. That utilitarian principle of doing something that derives the most benefit for all that's involved. Yeah, really great point, Paul. Thank you. I think either Stacy or Russa had their hand up and I missed it. I'm sorry, it came down.
I can let Alicia go first.
Okay, right. Go ahead, Alicia.
Oh, thanks, Russa. Yeah, I was just going to say it sounded so beautiful, everything that was, all the points that were made. And I was just reflecting that I've never actually seen that, or even a close example of that reflected, at least in my experience. So it really struck me, and I'm like, wow, like society would be completely different if people were even doing, say, 50% of this. And I mean, I'm not a historical expert, so I don't know what's happened that we are so far away, but you probably touched on it, Rickon, when you were talking about the spiritual aspect. I think because like there's so much focus on the material, the spiritual has been pushed to the wayside, and then we see kind of all the repercussions of that. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That point you made about just even if we could take up a percentage of this, society would, the face of society, 10%, if everyone just took up 10% to be more in the space of doing things for somebody else. Yeah, transformative.
I had a quick comment to add, which is that, so, this aspect of being a servant leader that's nurturing, that's, really almost like parental, taking care of, their team members, and being so thoughtful, and being caring, and consulting with them, and involving them, and rewarding them, and all these wonderful things that were just talked about here. I think one of the pieces that make this so hard to put into practice if you're not an entrepreneur and running your own company is the fact that we, especially in the US, we're so focused on the wrong stakeholders and how we manage and how we run, our business, that it all comes down to, the investors, the profitable, part of it. And so, when we're focused on investors versus our team, the entire dynamic changes and shifts. And you go from, from all these good, let's just say, qualities that you want to imbibe in your management that are, let's just say, frowned upon by upper management or by, the investors. And, you're kind of pushed into this, cycle of profitability where you have to focus on, things that are not nurturing, that are not, creating safety nets, to Paul's point, encouraging, instructing, you really don't, let's just say you don't have the time to do a lot of these things. So I know in my own experience, when I was managing a team at this one company, we were in a situation where we had to turn around. We were losing market share, and so it was a turnaround situation. And at the same time, like the entire team was already tired and frustrated, and sort of, I would say, they were had been neglected for quite some time. So, I was trying to sort of nurture them and, remotivate them and, create this culture of, support and love and, respect and encouragement. But at the same time, at the board of directors barking orders. So I just wanted to bring that up, that there's always this kind of dichotomy, if you will, in terms of what we want to do, in terms of being authentic servant leaders and, what's good for the people. And then you have, all these other factions that are going to, try to inhibit you or derail you from that path. And it's quite a challenge at times.
It's not always easy doing the right thing, right? Thank you, Russa. I just wanted to say hi, Ed. Thank you for joining and being here as always.
Good to see you.
Ed's back in India again after just like a week and a half, which is incredible. I don't know that many people that would travel to India that quickly after coming back. Ed, did you have anything to share? We're just in the section of qualities of a monarch. People are just looking at different things that are standing out to them.
Yeah, I was
And
just listening. Sorry, please.
please go ahead.
No, please finish what you were saying. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, and we were just kind of building on each other, and just I think you've caught most of it, but that's it.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, one thing that stood out to me from that section, and I know that a few of you touched upon this, is the affection that the leader has for the people that they're leading. And I was just looking into the psychology behind that, because there's a parallel psychology. So when we look at, because you mentioned the whole idea of the parental mood, when we look at what happens psychologically, when someone that we look up to, okay, it happens generally, but especially when someone we look up to has affection for us, treats us with affection, they're actually conveying something to us, because the affection conveys to us that we are valuable and that we're important. Part of the deterioration of the moral fabric and the social fabric, let's say, is that people don't feel that their leaders care about them. You see? So what's happening is when people don't feel that their leaders care about them, it makes them more insecure and also more survival focused. Because if the leaders don't care about me, if they don't value me, if they don't protect me, I've got to look after myself. So it creates more of a kind of dog-eat-dog society where, you know, no one's looking out for anyone. So therefore, it's each person for themselves and God for us all, basically. So I realized when I looked at this, that there's a subtle thread that runs between the leader's care and affection and the citizen's ability to be tolerant, to be humble, and to be forgiving. If you look at the implications of this section, you can do a very interesting thought experiment. And I've tried to run this through my own mind. The implication here is that in societies where the leaders are affectionate and show that they care for and respect the citizens will be more willing to overlook any negativity between them and other people. In other words, they'll be more tolerant, because it's like, you know, well, I'm protected. So someone does something, I don't become so easily disturbed and so quick to react. It gives people more capacity to give others the benefit of the doubt, you see? And you can look at this in your own life. When you're more secure, when we're more secure, we're more grounded. And therefore, it's easier to give people, I call it psychological space, right? So you can give people forgiveness. You don't take things personally. All of that stuff comes from security. So what we can understand in the modern society is we can trace it backwards. We look at the way that people treat each other, very quick to condemn, very quick to retaliate, very quick to be upset, very quickly to be disturbed. That means that the people in modern society do not feel valued and don't feel protected. You know, so Bhakti Tirtha Swami in this book and in the previous leadership book, he says it's literally the leaders make the age. You see, and this is one of the ways in which we can understand it. If you recall, many weeks back, we did a discussion on this. We looked at culture. We looked at the culture of the organization, and we said, if the organizational culture is like this, then tell me, what does that imply about the leadership? Right? And this is in the same kind of spirit. When you have a highly triggered society, it means that the leaders don't know how to lead or don't care how to lead properly. So that was just one reflection I was just having on this section.
Yeah, it makes complete sense, Ed, what you were just sharing, that this highly insecure, I would put it, society that we're in is a reflection of that not feeling cared for. And then it basically becomes everyone is fighting for themselves, right? Just survival of the fittest.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's also empowering from the perspective that we can also make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was thinking, Rikin, with your own teacher, Radhanath Swami, I was just thinking the example that he sets and the way that he behaves, you'll see that in many of the projects, and you know, one day I think many of you will find it an incredible experience to visit some of the projects that he's created. And you'll see that in those projects, there's a very different vibe, because there's a sense that people feel secure, they feel respected, they feel valued, and that spills over into, especially into the hospitality that they have towards everyone who comes there. It just creates an incredible experience, which generates more and more of the same positive energy. In other words, if you come into an environment where the predominant energy is that you're valued and respected, then even if you came in suspicious, but because that's the atmosphere and it's consistent, it's not like just one person amongst many, it's not like an anomaly, it's the normal overriding culture. You can quickly upgrade and become part of that, because we become attuned to the environment in most cases. So I was just thinking that's a very powerful example, and that's an example of someone who has made, is making, and continues to make a very powerful difference to the point that you were making, Rick.
And PT Swami was also the same way I felt, in his life. Did you want to carry on the conversation?
Happy to. Okay, so great to see all of you again. Apologies, I was slightly. So I really want to encourage you in that, and we asked you last week, you started it off, okay? So you started to put your notes down, and what I asked you to do as homework, I said, take that time out and complete it. Okay, I'll share my screen just to give you a recap of exactly the exercise that we asked you to do. So what we asked you to do here was to think about this idea that you've just, okay? The legacy, you're at your own funeral, and we asked you to think about 3 things. Okay, so you've just passed away right now. What are your biggest successes and deepest regrets at the time? That was one question. The second, and this was very important, what are those in attendance saying, thinking, and feeling about you? That was our second question. And the third question is, what would you like those same people to be saying, thinking about you? Okay, saying, thinking, and feeling about you. And I just tweaked it a little bit. I said, why? We discussed that a little bit also last week. So I wanted to, first of all, create a bit more space to have us explore what came to you when you completed that or filled that out a bit more. And the reason for this is to be very transparent, is that when we do debriefs, see that there's a whole psychology that sits behind it. There's a very different effect when we discuss something in a cursory way, then everyone moves on because life happens. There's a very different effect when we start to reflect, when we start to discuss, and also when we start to tune into how do I actually feel about what I've written or about what I've seen. See, there's a very powerful implication here. The modern society, it's not designed for people to grow and transform. And one of the ways in which the modern society disables that ability or makes it harder, let's say, doesn't disable, we have power, we can still do stuff, but it makes it harder. One of the ways is that people are so busy that they don't stop to think. And therefore, even when you catch some reflection that, oh, hold on, am I moving in the right direction? Then life just immediately sweeps you through with another 10 concerns, 15 emergencies. And therefore, even though you had that gap where you thought, let me just do a bit of inventory, then you're again carried away by the stream. You'll see something very interesting. During the time of the pandemic, you'll see that when people were closed off from the normal distractions, when they were put in a space where they had more space to think, what was amazing is that many people made some life-altering choices, right? I know in my industry, and I know more broadly because I looked at the research, After the pandemic, many people reoriented their lives. In fact, what they did was very similar to the exercise that we did with you. They saw people passing away. They heard about people dying of COVID. They heard about people becoming seriously ill. Some of them became sick themselves. And what it did is it brought to the forefront the permanent reality of our own mortality. So they were faced with this idea that, whoa, hold on, I know people who are passing away right now. I can pass away right now. And in the face of that reality, they started thinking, what the hell am I doing with my time? So they were confronted with their own mortality, and they were put in a space where the usual distractions were not so strong in their life. And what happened? Many people started to make very different decisions. So we wanted to recreate that space in what we do here. And that's why we do the debriefs, because it creates a space. You're not running around now. This is reflective time. We've brought to bear again the reality. You know, we are mortal. We're going to leave at some point. And we create a space where, okay, what does that mean? Knowing that I'm mortal, knowing that things can change, life can go at any moment. What does that mean for me? And so what I wanted to do, first of all, is get into this a little bit more. And what I think we'll do is we'll do this in pairs. So first of all, did you manage to do further work on what we asked you to do? I know, Paul, that's fair enough. I know sometimes people don't mention it. There could be so many reasons. Let me go to the others. Did you complete this? Did you work on this further? Yes, no? Give me a sign. Okay, some people say yes, some people say no. Okay, fair enough. Again, recreating that space is important. So the first thing we're going to ask you to do, and we're going to ask you to do this in pairs, and I'll put you in pairs, is even if you didn't write further, speak further, think more on it in your discussion, okay? So you can iterate as you're looking at this again and thinking, okay, I've passed away, what am I honestly regretful of, right? And that's important because that's also a clue to our values, and our values are meant to be a clue to how we use time, how we use energy, how we engage our emotions, that means relationships and so on. What did you learn about your regrets from this activity? What did you learn about the things that you know you want to be putting more time and energy into? Because, ladies and gentlemen, we all are in that space where, you know, we may or may not have so much time. Ronnie, thank you for joining. I know you have to drop. It was great seeing you. Okay. So again, getting into this and churning this a bit more, because these exercises, I'll be honest with you, they're not meant to be just philosophical. We're trying to create spaces where these exercises are transformative. So they leave an impression in your mind, they leave an impression in your heart, they leave an impression in your emotions, and they give an inspiration and an enthusiasm to do whatever reorientation you need to literally experience life at a higher level, okay? So, okay, Enver, I appreciate that you were not here last week, no problem. Enver, when you go into the breakout in the pairs, because we'll do this in pairs, your peer will just share with you what they wrote and what the exercise was. And again, you can just speak through what would your contemplation be in this space. So they'll share their answers and you can start thinking, okay, if I died right now, I regret A, B, and C, okay? I think my successes were X, Y, and Z, okay? If I died right now, honestly, these are the kind of things I think people who know me would be saying about me, would be thinking, would be feeling about me, okay? And then the last question, if I died right now, or if I died right now, these are the things I'd want people to say, okay? And these are the reasons why I'd want people to say this about me, to feel this way about me, etc. Okay? Okay, so any questions before we send you into the breakout? And we'll do this for about, let's say 15 minutes. Please, because this is very important. It's meant to be, don't rush. Even if you just do one of the 3 questions, it's okay. It's not about quantity here. It's about the transformative effect, okay? because we want this exercise to leave an impression on us deep enough to cause us to really think about how we're spending our time, how we're orienting our life, so we can really experience life in a much more deep and beneficial way. And of course, B.T. Swami mentions this in his book, and we also echo that point. Think about what this means also for the spiritual elements. If we talk about facing our own mortality, it does also imply what happens after I leave, right? What happens to the people here after I leave? What happens to me after I leave? Okay, so we'll pair you up. We'll give you 15 minutes, have that discussion. After 15 minutes, we'll bring you back into the main room. Any questions before we send you into the breakout? Okay, we'll bring you back 15 minutes from now. Prabhu,
Prabhu, how are you?
I'm good. How's it going?
Good. Just give me a second. I just have
Take your
to.
time. Take your time.
I'm just getting in the car. I'll be back in just a minute.
Okay. So people are coming back into the main room. Okay. Again, so, okay, that's good. So I can see everyone's back in the main room. Now, I'll be very transparent. There was another exercise I had planned for today, but we're not trying to run through stuff. All I want to do is just really tune into some of the conversations that you've had with a slightly different, there's a continuation from what we discussed last week, but there's also a slight additional emphasis. And we touched upon this at the end of last week, which is considering that what you've discussed, what you've also seen, right? So these are my successes, these will be my regrets, this is what people would be saying about me or thinking about me, this is what I would like them to think and why. In this discussion, I'd like to hear anything you discussed in your pairs, but also, are there any, how can I put this? Off the back of this, is there anything that you're inspired to do, adjust, change, keep, anything like that? Is there any, I call it lift, any kind of movement off the back of this in any particular direction? Okay, and there doesn't have to be. I genuinely want to open the floor for exploration and discussion, not in any way obligation. Ambika, I saw your hand up.
This was so good. So thank you for the exercise and the reflection. Alicia and I were in the room, and kind of off of the back of what I shared last week, Ed, around close relatives or close family that at times values deviation happens, and then they're a constant or more frequent complaint about how we're too busy for them when we choose different paths in the line of service. And what I had in my last question is, what are people saying about me? Is just that their hearts are healed and they have happy homes because I existed and shifts happen. So healing hearts and homes. But what I really, really actually got in this conversation was, it's kind of like healing hearts and homes out there. But for this particular bunch of like close relatives that have a constant complaint that I'm too busy for them, it's like, sort yourself out. Versus like, what am I actually doing about healing those hearts and those homes that are simply a demand for my time? And it may occur as, you're too busy for us constantly, which is a trigger for me. But there can be like a check-in I can like really be responsible around. If it's once a month, that isn't going to kill me. And it's not even that there's a shortage of time. I just am consciously avoiding those conversations now because they just generally are a complaint, versus like genuinely, authentically being concerned about their life and connecting to make a difference in whatever way I can, is something that actually didn't occur to me before. It's kind of like, you're just like negative energy, so I'm just gonna shove you aside and just go work with other people, literally. And so I think this conversation was so good to just get how we create pockets at times that work unconsciously, that kind of serve our purpose, but actually also they're a bit inauthentic because we're kind of lying to ourselves and hiding from going into the uncomfortable rooms that we're being called upon.
Wow,
to.
it's very, very deep. It's very, very deep, Ambika. And this term, the wording used, going to, called into those rooms which can be uncomfortable. It really brings up something for me about authenticity and being authentic in all relationships. So it's a very, very, very powerful point and a very transformative point, And if we can do that, then it gives us some additional strength. So, I find inspiring. I find one of the things I find inspiring in this group is that it also helps us to confront things, because even the way you spoke about it, it wasn't, oh, you guys are negative, so we'll put you in other space. It's like, no, these are things that I don't want to confront, So then it's that awareness that actually it's a choice that I'm making, It's a conscious choice that I'm making. At least if I bring that to awareness, then I can decide, is it something I want to continue for whatever reason, or is it something that I want to adjust? So thank you for kicking us off. I'd like to hear from anyone else who would like to share. What did this exercise bring up for you? Is there anything that you're inspired to do or not do off the back of this exercise? Any reflections at all?
This isn't so much about my reflection. I was just piggybacking off of what Ambika was saying, and it just reminded me of that. I always see it on Instagram when people are like, if you want to see how much progress you've made in your spiritual path, like, go stay with your parents for a week, or, go stay with some family, right? And it just reminds me of this, that we do all of this work and we're like doing all of these inspiring things. And then when you're with your close family, you tend to go back into old patterns. So probably like the highest level of growth would be bringing, all of that power and insight and growth to those like old relationships where you probably have the most patterning and old energy. So that's what it made me think of just now when Ambika was sharing that. So
Wow, thank you. And that's a very powerful point. Yes, sometimes in a vacuum, we may feel that we've changed and developed, but it's like, how deep is that change? And does it last in the company of people who are used to us behaving, thinking, feeling, maybe based upon old patterns? And that's a very powerful test that we can always do and see, like, how much am I affected by the same environment and people that I used to associate with before I developed certain awareness, certain new patterns or behaviors. That's a very powerful point. Thank you. And Rasa, I saw you were going to unmute.
I was just reflecting on, I had the pleasure of being paired with Tiffany, and beautiful person. And what I was just reflecting is, what I was really appreciating actually was, when we were talking about successes and regrets and all these kind of things, none of it was actually like what I achieved in life, the amount of money I made, the, rank that I have in society and so forth. It was all about, how did I, love people? How did I serve people? How did I help people? What, heart to heart impacts that I make and made. And one of the things that Tiffany said that I was really inspiring to me is that, she would like people to say that she made everyone feel so connected. Or, it's something that people are saying about her already. And like, that's just a beautiful thing because really at the end of the day, that's all that matters, right? Everything, all these material, pieces will all, sort of go away, and no one's really going to remember that impact as much as, the impressions that you leave on people, the impressions that you leave on society that are heartfelt. So just wanted to bring that up because that was kind of what really resonated with me.
Thank you. And just that, Rasa. So if, when you spoke, it reminded me of the statement by Maya Angelou, where she says something similar. People, they'll remember what you said, except they'll remember the how you made them feel. So what's the implication of that? If that's the thing that leaves the impression that people remember, what does that imply about how we could live our lives, or what we should be maybe focusing on a little bit more, if that's the thing that we will really be looking at the time that we pass away? Do you have any thoughts on that? That's all, Tiffany. Yeah.
It's kind of the feeling or emotion we have about ourselves, right? Because we can only love others to the extent that we love ourselves.
Wow.
So if we have that emotion and we wake up in the morning every day and we're feeling good that we did a good job, like, that you can put your hands on our heart and say, Tiffany, you're doing a good job today, and feel good about that. Then when you connect others to others, or you're around others, they're just going to feel that. And, I think sometimes we don't even, it can just be our vibe, right? Because if we feel good, people get the vibe. And, I've switched so much from being the human doer to the human being, because I used to think I had to do so much to make people feel good. And as a physician, I had to do all this, all this checklist. But now I realize if I feel good when that patient comes in or the person I meet, they're feeling good too, because this is my spirit, right? We're going beyond the physicality of doing things. We're going into our souls, and my soul is truly recognizing their soul. And that's how we're getting connected.
Well, thank you very much. It's actually, I had a conversation. I was asked to help out one particular group. So I was speaking with them earlier today, and they were doing one particular project, quite successful, actually, I'd say. But one of the things that was happening was the lead was burning out, and we were emphasizing that ideally what we're meant to be doing is giving from the spillover. And I was mentioning that if they continue to give in such a way that they have nothing left, they won't be able to continue giving, you know? So yes, it is important to give, but to your point, Tiffany, human being, right? We should make sure that we're actually building ourselves up, developing our consciousness, being inspired, being wholesome, and then that will spill over into everyone and every situation that we come across as well. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Russell, you wanted to share something as well?
Oh, I was just going to add that, you know, to address what your question was, is how to go about doing that. So like, you know, some of the top 2 traits that I would like people to say that, you know, I feel are my success, but I want to, you know, develop more is, you know, that to love deeply and to serve selflessly. And not to allow circumstances or life, you know, to change who I am and you know, my self-authenticity and humility. So I feel like those, you know, if I can, you know, continue working on those and developing those more, that really gets you to this point of, you know, like Tiffany was saying, like your energy just shines forth, and, you know, you don't really have to do too much other than, you know, just being that positive impact wherever you go, just being that positive energy, and, you know, being able to give as much as you physically and emotionally can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was really powerful. Anyone else? Alicia, I saw your hand go up, and then we'll go to Paul.
Yeah, this is all making me really reflect because now I've been talking, I was talking with Ambika about like meeting a lot of new people through these different virtual spaces. So it's always interesting meeting new people because they reflect back to you, I think, things that you don't always see about yourself. And as we mentioned, the people who've known us a long time don't always give us this feedback. But I think it's become really clear to me that everyone's like, oh, like my presence and who I am really impacts them in a positive way. And I think for myself, realizing, just as Rasa was saying, the biggest successes is really who you are and how you make people feel. And I feel for me personally, that's always been natural, but I've really devalued the importance of that. And so I wasn't as much like a doer. I was more on the being side, but always feeling like I'm not doing enough. So it's just interesting when we think about like, that is really what's most important. So for me, what I'm taking away is just really to step into that and own that is like, it's so powerful that that's the impact that I have on people, and not to feel like, okay, fine. You know, I think I always had this idea like, oh, you're a nice, kind person. Okay, whatever, you know, but like, you know, maybe not, you know, as ambitious or with the technical skills. And I always devalued that about myself. So to realize that is actually the most important thing, just that's what's hitting home for me, really, to be like, wow, that's great that's, you know, what you're naturally good at. And that's more than enough, you know?
Wonderful. That's a really powerful point. I saw that many times where some people, and I've definitely been there myself, where you think, oh, I've got to do lots of stuff, you know, but it's not necessarily the way that people are valuing us. Some people are like that, you know, but I think many people, and I find, especially as people become older and more mature, actually, then they value these higher things much, much more. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'm going to go to Paul, then I'm going to go to Ember. Paul, what did you want to share, please?
Ember and I had a wonderful chat, and I think a lot of it came out to many of the points we had here about the impact that we have on the people around us being very, very important. But I think at the root of it, it also comes down to being in solitude and doing ongoing definitions of success and authenticity. So I think we change through life. And it's
Mhm.
very, very easy, as I think you mentioned, Ed, in today's society to really get on the gerbil wheel and forget what's important because there are always so many other things to do. And
Mhm.
for me, when looking at my final days, I want to make sure that I've always been authentic and defining my own success, which obviously, it affects relationships and being rather than doing, and having real connection and impact with people, not only in my inner circle, but ideally also outside of it.
Wow, fantastic. And I really love that point about the solitude and making sure that that authenticity comes through as well. And yeah, and it's also just that the different circles we move in, right? Inner circle, outer circle, and yeah, that authenticity throughout is very, very, very powerful. So thank you. That's a very powerful reminder about being comfortable with who we are and letting that person interact in our day-to-day lives. Enver, you wanted to share something, please.
I want to thank Paul because it is always refreshing and giving me energy to chat with a grounded person as he is. So thank you very much. And for this opportunity as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. So I'm conscious. There was an exercise I wanted us to do, but I think it will be good to do it next week. But I'll explain everything about it next week when we actually have the call. Because I'm also conscious, I think people need to leave around this time anyway. Okay, so why don't we wrap it up there? If you didn't complete the activity, please do. In these forums, we want to make sure that we're able to give something which is as transformative as possible. So I know there's many sessions we've been having. We're deliberately not just speeding it up and squeezing things into a certain space and then moving on. Because these programs and exercises, and especially the book by B.T. Swami, are really meant to work a transformative change if the person wants, So and I'll be honest, I remember being with him before he passed away, and one of his key complaints is that he was complaining, or concerned rather, that's probably the better word, that he wasn't seeing enough people transform. He knew philosophy, he was very, very powerful in that, but his real goal was to help people evolve and develop their consciousness. And he knew from his experience, we saw he lived this, but as we attune our consciousness to higher levels, our experience of life and our impact on other people also, because we talked about that in today's session, our impact on other people is extraordinary. I was thinking about one close friend of B.T. Swami who was on some sessions with all of you in the past. I think he had a session with Satyananda Swami. I think a few of you were on that session. And it was interesting because he's someone I've known for many years. And one of the things I see about him is that even if certain things are happening in the external environment that may disturb other people, he's completely composed. And it's not just a mental gymnastic, it's something he's developed through evolution of consciousness, developing his consciousness, developing higher levels of consciousness. And so I was just thinking how much awaits us if we're able to take these tools and actually apply them, So I'm going to leave that with you as this exercise was done, and the implications of that, what you're going to do, how you're going to spend your time. It's very, very powerful if we can remember, not in a negative way, but we can remember today could be our last day, not in a morbid way at all. But am I making the day count? Am I doing the things that I know are important to me? Or am I like most people, which is just drifting, going with the crowd? And then let's be honest, for most people, if they were to pass away immediately, there will be huge regrets. Let's be honest, there'll be huge regrets. It's like, why did I spend my time just sitting in front of the television? I could have done this, I could have done that, I could have done this. What we want to do is be those people who don't leave with regrets, And it's just a simple decision about, where am I spending my time? Where am I spending my energy? Where am I spending my emotions, right? Who am I spending it with? And what's important, what's truly important, And I suggest that probably the happiest people in the world are those who have a real alignment with this understanding that every day is precious and who make every day count in terms of their own development of higher consciousness and their own ability to deal with their situations in a healthy way. In the Leadership One book, and I'll end on this point, B.T. Swami says that one of the implications of exercises like this is that we should try to do each day's activities with a sense of conclusiveness, meaning that I'm doing whatever I'm doing and I leave it in such a state that if I wasn't here tomorrow, it's in a healthy state and someone can take that on and move it forward as and when necessary, you know? So this was all sparked by this idea of leaving a legacy, because everyone leaves a legacy. When we interact with other people, when we speak, how we spend our time, all of these things leave a legacy. They leave trails in fate, right? They leave trails or trends in fate and in destiny. And it's just a question of being conscious. What am I leaving? What impressions am I leaving? You know, I always think when I look at this exercise that for the majority of people, they could have a much more powerful life experience if we just were aware of how precious every moment of our daily lives are. Okay, so great speaking to all of you. Please do complete that exercise. Please do complete it. And, we will see you next week for a very interesting activity that I'm going to do with all of you next Friday. Okay, take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Okay. Thanks for the heads up, Rasheshwa. Yeah, I wasn't in no way actually trying to make any comment about Balak or her mum, but I can understand how they can take it the wrong way. So I'll definitely make sure
Well,
I mention it.
I think you know, the way, or at least she just wasn't you know, her mom was just not I guess, because you saw it as maybe like a, you know, a fault of like the, you know, the transportation, or sorry, the delivery like company.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And to me, to be honest, when you sent your initial message that they only came to like, you know, Ramnagar, I was just like, I told Neha, I was like, well, why would you send it so it could only get there, right?
Sorry?
And she said that.
Oh, Krishnanagar.
You know,
Krishnanagar.
Krishnanagar, sorry, I said Ramnagar, Krishnanagar.
Yeah.
And I told her, I was like, why would you send it that it could only get that far? That doesn't make sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then she was saying that she actually was the one who paid for, you know, like she actually paid for it to get from Krishnanagar to you. But I guess it made it seem, I guess to me, like what it made seem was like, if it wasn't for your friend, the package wouldn't have gotten there.
Yeah, well, that's the impression I got, because my friend, because when that person who was meant to deliver it, he messaged me a day or two before, and he wanted the contact of the person who can direct him as to how to get here. So I gave him the number of Kirtida, who's in, you know, who lives in Mayapur, and since she's one who told me that they were insisting that it would only take it as far as Krishnanagar. But anyway, but to be honest, that's secondary, because none of that's a reflection on Palak or her mother. I didn't think it's any reflection on them at all. It's actually, but I thought that maybe it was just the courier being a bit difficult, because because I was thinking if they paid the courier to bring it to a particular destination, and then the courier says, I'm only going to go as far as this distance, and then someone else has to pick it up. I was thinking that's unfair on them, because they paid him to actually take it all the way to this particular location. But I didn't think
exactly
on them. Yeah, it was. I don't.
No, I know, and I think, and it's not, you know, and I know, I ultimately know they don't feel that, but I think because of the challenge, they feel like their effort was maybe not fully like valued.
Oh,
that's it.
No, not at all. I know it. Look, I came to India 23 years ago, 2000. Yeah, 2000. I know how hard it is to get things done sometimes. It's not about, yeah, but anyway, it's fine. I will definitely message her and explain, because this is just a misunderstanding. But I'm glad, but thank you for telling me. Thank you for giving me the context.
Yeah, I
Okay,
knew
cool.
that you wouldn't be able to pick it up, and I told Paul, like I said, we're not waiting till May to chat about it. I said it's important to chat about it as soon as possible.
Yeah. This is fun. And anything like that, listen, anything, you can always tell me. We'll have our honest conversation. It's good. All right,
Yeah.
cool. No worries.
From-
No worries.
Just, can you flick off the recording?
Yes, I can. Oh, actually, I forgot to stop the record. So let's just do that
We'll
now.
cut it out
Okay, so
before we